And as you guys know, we worked with primary consultants with Paul the last time in both 2017 when we went out for both bond and capital override, and in 2018 when we went out for M&O override. Once again, that idea of getting his stamp of approval, and in terms of I recommend you moving forward, in these surveys, looking for those numbers over 60%, which we had last time. We clearly have it this time. Our numbers in those override and bond elections were in the 70s across the board: 71, 72, and 75% approval. The last three election, or I guess 3 votes, 2 elections that we went out to our community. We've been supported for a long time, but as Paul mentioned, not to take it for granted and put full effort into it. But the first step is seeking board approval for going out for elections. So that kind of brings us to the point of Paul's presentation. And if there are no questions, then we can move on to the actual items that are related to this.
Just a quick comment. And Paul, thank you for the research. That was great. Hopefully you can send that along, and just would love to have this to reflect on. Not as much so for the override, but I think more so of it just showing a challenge for the district. There's a lot of people unsure about Osborn. They just don't know about Osborn. There's a lot of support. As you mentioned, the people who have an opinion about Osborn, 80% of it's positive. There was a huge number of people who just don't know yet about Osborn. So we've got a challenge of educating people about Osborn, both in this election and just going forward. But I think the people will support the override again, and I think it's a no-brainer. So appreciate all your help, Paul.
Thank you, and a happy birthday to you as well. Sure.
Thanks.
All right.
I'm just about in that 40 to 50 demographic. I won't say how close I am, though. I'm getting closer, though.
Due to accommodate some scheduling limitations, it's going to take the agenda item 8B out of order and consider that open to any motions regarding item 8B. To consider, discuss, amend, if desired, and if deemed advisable, to adopt a resolution ordering and calling a special budget override election to be held in and for the district, and declaring the deadline for submitting arguments for and against the election to the Maricopa County School Superintendent as August 12th, 2022 at 5 p.m., and approving the governing board's argument in support of the special maintenance and operations budget override election. Actually, one point, saw your note about reading it into the record.
Yes. So we didn't, as required, with this, the resolution is in the board packet. Our pro statement was not actually in this packet. So if I could have the clerk read it into record, just so that everything is.
Should I do that now or after I move this?
You can do it now, just so that everyone knows what you're voting for, because it's voting for calling the election for that resolution, and it's also approving the pro statement. The pro statement at the same time.
The following is the pro statement that would be placed. Dear neighbors, we are asking you to renew a 15% maintenance and operations budget override, which is set to decline in 2024. Since this continuation of an existing override, since this is a continuation of an existing override, this is not a new tax and not a tax increase. The override dollars are needed to pay for the following programs which directly impact children in the classroom: competitive salaries for teachers and staff, music, art, PE, library services, reduced class size, increased student achievement, full-day kindergarten, staff development, gifted programs. Despite recent efforts to increase education funding, the need is great and cannot be solved in a one-year infusion of dollars. Failure to renew the override will reduce or eliminate the above opportunities and enrichments for students. Based on research data, we feel strongly that these programs are a necessary part of a solid and elementary school education. A recent community survey supported this conclusion. In addition to educating students, high-quality schools stabilize and increase property values while building community pride. As always, we thank you for your past support and are grateful for your continued efforts to make our neighborhoods a desirable place for all. Please vote yes on Osborn's override. Signed, Governing Board, Osborn Elementary School District.
Thank you, Mr. Hermes. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Yulin. It's great hearing from you, and I hope for your speedy recovery.
Thank you very much.
Good night. All right. Cool. Then leave whenever you need to go.
Okay,
I gotta
now.
I gotta
hit it, guys. It's my birthday.
All right. Then we will go back to the regular order. Item 7, administrative reports since the May meeting. There any questions or need for clarification on the reports?
It's much shorter since there are fewer reports, as administrators will be picking up their reports in August.
Yep. And I look forward to the new format.
Correct.
In August. So looking forward to that. All right. Going over to the action items. 8A, proposed 2022-2023 expenditure budget. Set public hearing date for adoption of the budget and approval to spend funds from insurance proceeds.
Not sure if your mic's turned on.
There it goes. Okay, good evening. I'll be going through the proposed budget, looking at the summary that's in your packet first. The summary walks through the proposed budget in comparison to the final version, the final May revision of the 21-22 M&O expenditure budget to see those proposed increases or decreases in the different lines, funding lines that make up the total maintenance and operations budget. Important to point out in the proposed budget for 22-23, this is the second year in a row that we've proposed a budget based on anticipating legislative action, since there is not a state passed budget yet for next fiscal year. And so what that means is that districts are allowed to include what they anticipate the legislation may include in that final budget. The importance of that is if we don't anticipate high enough, we're locked in when we propose our budget to that being the maximum, that then we can't revise up to increase our budget between proposing and adopting. So whatever we propose tonight, we're kind of locked into. We can revise down before we adopt, but we can't revise up. And the importance of that is for tax rates. So the county Board of Supervisors begins setting tax rates in July, so that then those can be finalized at the beginning of August and go out. And so that's why you're not allowed to go up from your proposed to your adopted. The importance of then setting your adopted and anticipating high when you don't know yet what the state budget's going to be is so that we can maximize budget capacity in our overrides, which are triggered based on the state revenue control limits. And so not knowing what those are, we want to make sure we're anticipating high to fully capture override capacity. As far as the tax rate goes, proposing or estimating high does not impact our local taxpayer because we are a state aid district. So we receive state equalization funding in the way that the tax rates are set. So another important piece to know as representatives of the community that proposing high does not have an impact to the local taxpayer. The local taxpayer is going to pay the same amount. They have what's called a QTR. So that qualifying tax rate is the maximum that the local taxpayer will pay. And then the additional budget needs for the district is then made up with state aid, state equalization. So proposing high does not have an impact to our local taxpayer, but it helps us make sure we're maximizing budget capacity, particularly in our overrides going into setting the tax rates. So with that, looking at the side-by-side summary from the final May revision of 21-22 to the proposed 22-23, you can see the largest difference is on the base level per weighted student. That's over $400 more than sitting right at just over 4,800. That includes some additional, that's where all of my loading in of anticipating legislative funding levels comes into play. So whereas we know year to year that there's that inflation capped at 2%, well, in addition to that, I built in what Osborn's portion of an additional 50 million statewide increase would be to the base support level based on our portion of the state student count. That's a dollar amount that the legislature has been talking about this entire session and going back and forth around what that looks like. But I anticipated putting it on the base level. Additionally, anticipating growth in funding for SPED students in their Group B weights. So as our special education students generate additional Group B funding weights, putting an additional 100 million into those SPED weights, again, based on what Osborn's portion of the statewide student count is. Other than that, those are the only and kind of proposed, anticipated, that isn't finalized in any of the state budgets yet. None of the other items have any of those additional factors built in, just strictly sticking to what we already know from the prior year in the state funding formula. So you can see then as that flows through all the way through there, it increases our, again, maximizing that override capacity. So increases our 15% override projections by about 230,000, sitting right over 2.5 million in that proposal. And then overall sitting just under 22.5 million in our maintenance and operations proposed budget. That's an increase of our final, compared to our final May revision of the 21-22 school year of 1.8 million. To put that into comparison to the numbers that were presented to the board in May from Budget Committee, that's approximately 1.2 million more in revenue than what Budget Committee was working with when they made their balanced budget recommendation to the board in May. Again, none of these are known at this time until we have an approved state budget. And so we fully anticipate we would come back to the board with a revised budget in August, early August, to align with the final state approved budget. Before I open up for questions, just wanted to additionally point out the purpose is also to set the time for the public hearing to adopt this proposed budget, which would be at the next board meeting on July 12th at 5:30, as well as the approval. The public hearing will also be to hear and then an action item following to approve the expenditures of insurance proceeds. It's required in statute that if we are going to expend any insurance proceeds from insurance claims or things like that that have been resolved for the district, that we also do that through a public hearing and then official action.
Is that a significant amount? Insurance?
No.
Okay.
No, it's less than 20,000 a year.
Okay.
It's mainly for claims that and which result in funds that the district receives through others' insurance, damage claims and things like that we receive.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues? No? Okay. Well, thank you for putting this together, and we look forward to seeing what the legislature does in the next couple days, right?
Yes.
And look forward to the revised budget in August. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're skipping ahead to item 8C because we've already done 8B. So that's going to be on page 124 of the packet.
This is under the authority of Governing Board Policy BGF. The board may consider suspending Governing Board Policy BGB as it pertains to first and second readings of adjustment of policy for the purpose of addressing item 8E on this agenda.
Very quickly, we've got an item coming up, one item from now that's going to be a revision to the calendar. We're going to want to get this done before July 1 gets here. So I'm asking to do this in just one hearing rather than the normal 2 hearings that policies require. And so in order to do that, the governing board will need to suspend policy BGB, which requires 2 hearings.
Okay, so
if you just kind of scroll down to the bottom.
Is this for item 8E or 8D? Just to clarify. Should be for 8D, right?
Correct.
Okay,
8D,
so
yes.
So are there any questions about suspending the policy for purposes of looking at the calendar? No. Is there a motion?
I move that we suspend governing board policy BGB for item 8D.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. So going to item 8D, approval of revision of GDDR to include Indigenous Peoples Day as a paid holiday for all staff. GDDR supports staff vacations and holidays.
Yeah, so the governing board has already approved the calendar for next school year. In that, we included October 10th, 2022 as a school holiday. In order to include this as a paid holiday for all staff, the administration seeking a change to policy GDD, the regulation, which is for support staff vacations and holidays. So if we scroll down, you'll be able to see that regulation that has, all the other days, Labor Day, Veterans Day, and such, adding Indigenous Peoples Day to this list of support of paid vacations and holidays.
Well, I commend the district for doing this. Any questions or discussion? No? All right. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve revision of GDDR to include Indigenous Peoples Day as a paid holiday.
Is there a second? The motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one is 8E, which is out-of-state professional development opportunities for governing board members Juan Carlos Flamand, Ed Hermes, Sue Corbin, Eleni Aguilar, and Luis Peralta for the 2022-2023 school year. And my understanding is this is just a placeholder, so we don't have to do individual approvals in the future.
Yeah, and what it allows us to do is for approving these potential dates for out-of-state travel, so that when it comes time for procuring that, a lot of times, we've looked these things up and said, oh, I want to, members would like to go to such and such conference, and early bird registration's already passed. And so we wind up incurring a higher cost for both board members or for myself going to some of these conferences. So these next 2 items are just stating potential out-of-state or out-of-county professional development opportunities for both the board and for item 8F for the superintendent. This list does not mean that you are all going to all of these conferences, nor does it mean that on item 8F that I'm going to all of those conferences. It just allows us to approve these ahead of time so that we can take best advantage of any early bird registration or, especially in these days, flight arrangement opportunities.
Would there be votes on these once people have decided, or basically at this point, we're authorizing all 5 of us to go if we wanted to?
And if we have the funds. Yeah,
and
so authorizing this is authorizing this for the year, so it wouldn't be brought back
at
the later time.
Okay. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. Motion carries. Item 8F, which is the same thing, but for Dr. Robert, approving out-of-state travel to these educational professional development opportunities. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? I vote aye. The motion carries. Item 8G, approval of superintendent contract for Michael Robert. This is the renewal at the end of the second year, when this contract would replace the current contract, which has 1 year left for another 3-year term. The governing board met with Dr. Robert in executive session last month to discuss the contract and reach an agreement, reflecting the board's value of his services and his dedication to the district. So though we're just going to vote on it, this has been discussed in detail during the executive session. Any other comments or motions? Motion's been made. Any seconds? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. This one is approval of revised 2022-23 calendar to change parent-teacher conference schedule.
All right, so we need to make just a slight tweak to the calendar that we approved, I think in December. One teeny oversight that was made as we transition from trimesters to quarters, which we are all very excited to do. In the past, OMS has always offered their fall parent-teacher conferences more in line with the quarter timeline, and K6 had been in line with the trimester. We are proposing that K6 hops back in line with where OMS always was, to be right at the end of quarter one, so that we can have that check-in with all of our parents right after the first quarter of teaching and learning, which would mean that we would only have 2 conference windows. I think it got a little confusing in the past that K8, K6 was different than 7-8. So now we'll just have the 2 windows, one in fall right after quarter one on September 28th, 29th, and 30th, and then one in spring on March 8th, 9th, and 10th. So the recommended change to the calendar would be eliminating the conference window in November. It was November 16th, 17th, and 18th. So we're excited for that early communication with all of our parents and also to be on the same schedule K8. Any questions?
With the elimination of the extra parent-teacher conferences, is there an extra day of instruction that the kids end up having?
No, I think it was 3 early release days then in November, which would then land in line with OMS, the 3 early release days.
So I guess what I'm saying is in November, dates we're getting rid of are 16, 17, and 18.
Ah, I see what you're asking there.
So Wednesday was a half day, 17 and 18 are full day. So is there an extra day of instruction? Not that that's necessarily a bad thing,
It's
but
not a bad thing. My brain is not catching up quickly to
It's
your
not
question.
extra day of instruction, it's more hours of instruction because
Yes,
those were
in
reduced
November.
days, but they're counted as a day.
so does that change the amount of, so this number at the end, total 180 days, is that still accurate?
Correct.
Yes.
Even after we get rid of it? Okay. All right.
Not getting rid of any days off.
Yeah.
It's only eliminating conferences. So what we normally had, if you look at the first orange there in September, we normally had that, but that was only OMS.
Okay. All right.
but all schools were in session on those days. So when we have parent-teacher conferences, school is still in session. We don't take days off for conferences.
Okay. I am mindful of honoring the decisions we made in the past. I will just briefly comment that I still think we should have ended the school year on the 25th of May. I'm not going to ask to reopen the discussion, but I just wanted to see if this changed the count, and perhaps we need to look at everything. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for your question.
All right. Is there a motion or any questions? Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Cool. That is it for the action items, right?
Correct.
All right. We do have board development that we haven't had in a couple of months, so and we are doing very well in terms of timing. So I think it'd be helpful to, spend some time together and go through this conscious discipline video on empathy. So, Dr. Rivera, I don't know if you want to take us through it.
Sure. In the past when we've done these, we haven't watched the video here. Are you wanting to watch the video? It's about 5 minutes.
Oh.
Normally that's homework for you guys ahead of time to watch the video, and then we just have discussion.
I'm okay. I watched it. I'm okay. Does anybody need to watch it? Okay, let's 5 minutes. Let's put it on.
So we're on page 132. If you could just click on the hyperlink that's on there.
Welcome to Conscious Clips and Our Time Together. Today we're going to talk about empathy. And empathy is the key skill needed to handling the fussing and fits in your life, as well as maintaining connection through conflict. Now, everybody has fits. I had 3 just yesterday. We watch baseball players have fits with other team members, with the referee. We have radio shows where people just call in for the sole purpose of having a fit. So what happens? What is a fit? A fit really occurs when the world is not going our way. It's the general emotional term I use to describe when we resist what is. So when a 2-year-old throws a fit because you took the crayons away while they're scribbling on the floor, it's not going their way. When a 4-year-old says, I hate you because they can't have cookies before dinner, it's not going their way. When a 9-year-old slams the door because they can't have a sleepover, the world is not going their way. And this goes all the way up to a 60-year-old driving down the highway furious at someone who's got their blinkers on for the last 10 miles. The world is not going our way. So the first step, since fits occur when we resist what is, the first step in handling them is to accept what is. The moment is as it is. So when it first happens, we're going to take a breath and say the moment is as it is, as opposed to, what are you doing? What should you be doing? You should have your shoes by now. Resisting what is makes it worse. Disappointment and frustration are hard skills to handle. So one of the things we want to do is understand that when we do get upset, we get again into the lower centers of our brain and we become defensive and we look for blame. So when a child is having a fit or when another person is having a fit, they're going to become defensive and attacking. Our job then is to take a breath and offer empathy. And now empathy is not about happying people up. One mother wrote me and said, well, I tried empathy and it didn't work. She thought she would say, oh, you seem angry, and the child's going to go, oh yeah, okay, I'm fine now. Empathy is a skill we offer to children who are upset or to another person who's upset, to leave them with the ownership of their upset. And so when a child says, I hate you, our job is to say, you seem angry. It's hard when you don't get the remote when you want it. So our job is to offer empathy. If we're in a reactive state, all we want to do is stop the action instead of offer empathy. And we might say stuff like this, you get me involved in this and you're both going to go to your room. Instead of trying to stop behavior, we want to offer the empathy. Here's some words you can use. You seem angry, you sound angry, and then follow that with, it's hard when you have to go to bed when your favorite TV show is on. It's difficult when all your other friends get to go and you don't get to go. And then tag that at the very end with, you can handle this. And then that's all you do. Then you walk away. Does it make the child happy? Are they going to go, oh, thank you, Mom? No. Or thank you, Dad? No. But what it does is it leaves them with the ownership of their own upset. So they can take personal responsibility to decide whether they're going to change their mind or change their actions. By us fussing at people who are upset, they then can justify being upset because it's our fault. Use empathy when someone, your spouse, your coworker, your children, when they get upset, take a breath, get out of the lower centers of the brain that want to stop the behavior, rise through taking a deep breath, being a star, to the higher centers, see from their point of view, and say, you seem really disappointed. You were hoping that you could spend the night with your friends. You can handle this. So until next time, here's your homework. When you find yourself or other people upset, offer empathy. Here's some phrases to get you started. You seem angry. You sound upset. Follow that with, it's hard, and describe the situation. Or you were hoping that, and describe the situation. Or you wanted, and describe the situation. And at the very end say, you can handle this. And then walk away. They're still going to grumble and bleed and whine, but you've left them with personal responsibility. Until next time, I wish you well.
In that video, a couple really important things that she discusses. One, I love this line so much, I wrote it down. Empathy is the skill we offer children who are upset to leave them with the ownership of their upset. Just a really powerful thing. It's about that sense of responsibility and letting the kid own their anger or their disappointment or whatever. But we also speak about conscious discipline as being the work of the adults. And a lot of times we as adults want to control situations, stop the upset from happening. Or when it's us, like our own kids, we want to fix it for them and make it better because we don't want to see them sad. We don't want to see them upset. We don't want to see them disappointed. And so we try and take their upset away from them. And that's not what empathy is. Empathy leaves them with their upset, but also empowers them to know that they can handle it. And she gives really good sentence frames and tools for doing that. So just a couple questions. We can look at all of these questions or a couple of them or just one of them. But you can see down there at the bottom, I've got 3 questions for us to consider. First of those says, Dr. Bailey ends by instructing practitioners to offer empathy and then walk away. What do you imagine that would look like in a classroom? You've got good, I'm sure, very good ideas and a totally different perspective than what we may be preparing our minds for as, being a high school teacher. So, but they're still kids all the same. So just in different sized bodies, but full emotions all the same.
It's interesting when you think about empathy, because that's one thing I practice in my classroom. I don't ever want to offer sympathy. I always want to offer empathy. I always remind kids, look, I know where you're at, because guess what? I've been there. Probably quite a bit closer near the teachers. And it's like you say, I never tried to get a kid to stop. Like, I'll get them to stop being upset at disrupting the class. But most of the time it's more like, hey, let's talk this through. You can own it. You can understand where you're coming from. That'll give you some time on your own. And it really helps keep the class calm. It's more of a sense of, for me, with empathy, the kids own it. The kids know how to regulate themselves. The kids know where they can go to handle it. So it's not a, stop what you're doing. It's more like take a break, figure yourself out, come back to it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, what do you imagine in our elementary classrooms this would look like?
That's what I was thinking about, in that I would think that, based on sort of my own experience as a parent in my home, so it might be different from a school setting, that there's often a physical component to the interaction, and offering empathy in part through comforting physical comfort. I don't know if that plays a significant role in school, because sometimes my I have one daughter who just feels a lot, and she owns things, but sometimes like it helps to like hug her, and like just physically she kind of calms down and is able to process those things. So I suspect that there's less leeway for that, latitude for that in the classroom.
What it looks like in our site visits is the unconscious discipline, like depending on the grades, like they have, like one example is they have little places where children can go self-regulate, and they can there's some classrooms have colors, some of them have happy faces, some of them have little corner set up with a fish tank or a little water fountain, different things. So as they are being addressed by the teachers, they're able to go there if they choose to and self-regulate, like sit by themselves and or change the happy face to angry face and sit here and read a book or play with this activity. That's what it looks like to me in the classrooms when we visited.
A lot of times, though, these actions will happen before you can get there. That's at the problem-solving stage. But just imagine teachers just asked everyone they're working in a center, and they're really loving the work that they're doing, and the teachers ask them to put away those manipulatives, those math manipulatives that they just want to be with, and they are just having a fit, and they don't want to. They're throwing it, or slamming it down, or grabbing it from someone else. In that moment, can you imagine in that moment? And that safe place is somewhere we'll get to in a little bit. But in that moment, if you just came up and said, "You seem upset. You really want to keep working. You can handle this."
There was something incomplete about the rubric that she was offering to me. That like it requires almost a being the higher level thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a conversation you have when someone's like sad but not upset. Like if someone's upset, like that's why, like my daughter, like I can have that type of conversation of like, yeah, no, that sucks, and you'll get through this and that sort of thing. But it's because she's already spent 5 minutes crying, and I've been holding her, and now she's ready to talk. So there was something incomplete about that, and I don't know if her guidance is more for older kids.
No, I think
or
it
anyone.
encompasses all the grades. This isn't the totality of how to handle a situation. This is practicing the skill of empathy. We talked about noticing before, right?
Yeah.
Before you can get to the empathy, you have to notice who the child was. Then you can move into empathy, where you offer this. There are steps to this. This isn't the totality of how to handle a discipline problem through empathy. There are many stages of it. This is a skill, though, that adults need in order to go through the full repertoire.
And then with it too, like as a teacher, it may look like there's something missing, but in a classroom, what would be missing here in a classroom is a relationship with the students. What empowers me to notice, or both notice my students and let them handle know who they are. I've noticed where they are in many ways, not like physically, but mentally, emotionally, and that helps me with them. So if it feels like there's something missing, it's because it's the relationship aspect of it too.
I think that there's a lot of cultural things, and I guess you would have picked up on that. But like for me, like I've seen it like displayed because I volunteered in almost every grade, and Miss Singh would do a great job. Like when like preschoolers are there at that age where they do throw like real fits, and she would address it in a very like loving, fun voice, and children would just calm down and just like, oh, yeah, like I love that, and I'm moving on because now my teacher's moving on. But like, it doesn't really happen that way in all the classroom settings, and depending on the teacher, I've seen it work like in different ways. But I do think that culturally, like I would feel like I need something more like. It just kind of feels like it's just like in a way ignoring it, like oh you're addressing it, but like if you don't understand what empathy means, like for a child, like they may not process it like if at home, like their way of like their parents addressing certain things as hugging and talking things through. That's not going to happen in the classroom. So it kind of like if you're thinking about it as a parent, does feel like something's missing. And culturally, I feel like it did until I understood what empathy was. And then I'm like, oh, it looks like this in my classroom, and it works well. And the teacher really has a really great relationship with their kid and just knows how to talk to them. And I think that's the biggest thing is knowing how to talk to your students because every student reacts different.
I guess that ties it into that noticing part because I guess the approach might be different. So, but yeah, no, that helps because it definitely. I do that, but after, sometimes the and I guess your comment, Luis, about like if the person's being disruptive, you actually have to address that, and not necessarily like if it's interfering. So that might be more, just require more. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, it's a process, and I agree with what I was hearing. It's just I need to think about it more because like it almost seems cold and detached, right? I don't know. That's like it's like you got this thing to figure out here, which yes they do, but I guess I expect a 10-year-old to need help figuring things out versus maybe a 17-year-old.
Oh yeah, and part of those next, this is again skill for adults, and number two, part of a repertoire of many skills that are going to be put into action. But one of the things that she talked about in that video is first, before you're stepping in too much and imposing your adult self on the situation, you're noticing some things, you're offering that empathy, and then that leaves them in that moment with an opportunity. You may have to go beyond, but first with the opportunity to maybe change their mind or change their actions with how they're going on. That may not happen. So it may need to get to a point where maybe some choices are being offered. It seems like, you want to keep doing that. It's time to move onto this. Would you like to blank or blank? There's lots of things, but you get into narrowing what the situation is, ultimately with the goal of trying to bring them into that executive functioning. Like it's not a counseling session, so there's time for talking through things later. But ultimately, how can I stay in my best self to help get this child to be in their best self, to get through this? It's going to happen all throughout the day in lots of different forms. So, just as a script, as text, I can see how, there's a coldness to it. And one thing with this too, this was just lecture. It didn't offer that in the classroom look of, and here's a little snippet of a teacher putting this into practice.
Fair enough. Like I suspect the teachers won't use those exact words. Like it'll probably be tied to whatever the child might respond to.
In my classroom, it's more of a we address it then and there. I make sure they know that they can handle themselves. Be in my classroom, multiple rooms, they go off on their own. Then when I have time, after everyone else is working, I go and I talk through it with them. I don't try to counsel them, but I just help them process themselves so they can go back to be their best self. That's
21-year-old me in the classroom with a bunch of, with 38-year-olds wasn't my best self. And so something like this, although it seems like, they wouldn't say that, sometimes it's nice getting this beginning script because I never would have known to say, you seem this, and to have told the child, you can handle it. 21-year-old me would have wanted to take control of that situation, stop it, be very firm, all of those types of things, and kind of ignore the child in that and assert the adult in the situation. So, for those that are new or don't have that empathetic self as their first go-to method, sometimes just getting a script to work with, practice it before it becomes just a natural part of them. It took me a while to be an empathetic teacher, I think.
Funny you mentioned the whole taking control thing, because that's one thing that I always go back to is thinking about, like, when I'm upset, I try to imagine, like, how would I react if someone came to me and said, like, hey, Juan, like, calm down, chill out. Like, that doesn't necessarily work, So, like, if it doesn't work for me, if it doesn't work, like, most adults don't like to be told, like, calm down. Like, that often doesn't work. So, like, why would it work for a child? They're
So
yeah.
bring it to the second question there, either practicing or maybe relating. Has there been an opportunity where someone's offered you empathy and it impacted you to maybe change how you were feeling and were about to act? Or maybe if there's some way that you've done this where you were able to offer empathy, either in the classroom or you're in the classroom, at home, in your life, with your spouse, with a friend.
We don't do a lot of, well, we do some empathy at work in a law firm. It's actually a skill that is more like, we're working on it more. Like, I find that it's actually, I can't come up with anything right now, but more and more I think it needs to make its way to work. But with my kids, yeah, I do it. I mean, it happens. It's hard to even point something out because it happens all the time.
I have 3 teenagers and a 21-year-old, and I won't give away which one it was, but and I won't give away the full situation because they'll figure it out if they're watching this live stream. But with one of them having a conversation, some social dynamics, were really upset, and I wanted to make the hurt go away. I wanted to make the pain go away. I wanted to make the sadness that this individual was feeling go away. And I found myself thinking about this, and I offered, that I can tell you're really bummed out by the way is treating you, and pulled myself out of it. Gosh, I wanted to take it away, but I, listened to the talk about it. And, you've got this. You know what to do. Was able to leave it at that, and we'll see what happens, but the power is all theirs. It's not mine to free them of the opportunity to critically think their way through something, but they know that I'm there for them still.
And that makes a difference when you're the boss and when your kid's doing something stupid, you want to say, stop it, don't do that. But you need to let them say, you don't have any idea, Mom, what happened. And this is what George did, and this is what Sam did. And then you talk, well, what would you think? How would you handle? Instead of that, slam the door right in the beginning when a kid does something bad or something. It's just, they need to be able to know that they can trust the person that's in charge by, well, let me explain it to you. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you how it felt when it happened. then that makes it a lot easier for the child and the parent and the teacher.
And what a great avenue this is for helping build that trust between our adults and kids.
Well,
This
thank
is something we can also tie into question 3 real quick. We as a board can work on too, because we have the override coming out. And one thing we have to consider is when we are knocking doors, we may knock on a door where we think they're upset, but they're really just frustrated. And it's something I've learned making a lot of calls the past week for Stanton. Some people, they just need a place where they feel validated in their frustration. They talk themselves through it as they're talking with you, rather than just walking away from it. You notice where they're at. You validate the frustration. You say, hey, you seem frustrated by this. Let's talk about it. But it's more them talking. So that way we can work with our community a little bit better. That's just the way I look at it.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing and participating. I learn. I really value the way we're doing this development and having conversations the board meetings. So reflections, and then agenda items.
Yes.
Okay. Please.
I want to start by saying we had a very tough crowd today. To anyone who's online, hello. Quick, easy meeting today, but I really, really enjoyed our talk about empathy because it's one of those skills that more people need. And it's also nice for us as a board to talk about it because we get a little snippet of thinking about how our teachers have to think about how they handle their kids. I enjoyed the Dr. Robert's story, 21-year-old me with a whole bunch of 8-year-olds. This is why I don't teach elementary. She's instructed how to do it. But at the same time, it's great to talk about these things because these are things that our teachers have to do anyways. This is something veterans are doing, new teachers are doing. So it's great that we're tuning into what they're doing. And also it helps us, like I would say, with our community, with each other, when we do site visits, maybe even the kids. So true.
I like these videos. I will say that my criticism is the lack of examples, and but I think for some of us it's easier to like grasp and understand. We either like volunteer or been in classroom settings, but people like Juan and Ed who don't spend enough time or they spend most of their time around lawyers. I think I'm imagining by the question they always ask that it's difficult for them to understand a lot of these topics because for those of us who are like volunteering in the classroom, we see it displayed, and I think for them it's like I think she does a really great job, and I really like her explanations, but like there's really no like examples for them to see it. And also I think for me that it's been really helpful like, from the beginning of just serving on this board and stuff that I learned on conscious discipline. I try to use first with myself and then with my children and family and my friends. The empathy and all those other things are things that we choose daily and we have to work towards because you don't, at least unless you're a teacher or you're in the school system, you don't really think like that. At least I don't. I have to be conscious of like the words that I use with my children and other kids and my family. So like this allows me to be a better human because I learn from what's happening in the classrooms.
Well, when you're in the classroom, you don't know the child that's just going bananas. You don't know what their home life is like. And if you calm them down to just kind of generalize the different things, you'll find out maybe the dad's been sexually abusing the child. But you have to let them trust you because trust is a big, big part of life. That the children need to be able to trust the adult and then be able to say, okay, this is what's really bothering me. This is what happened last week, or this is what happened when I was in the bathroom with a girl and she, it's just, they need the confidence that they can trust the adult they're talking to.
It was a quick, efficient meeting. I agree with what, so I appreciate that, but I agree with what you were saying, Elaine. Yeah. You know, it think I understand empathy, and I think I am empathetic enough, but it is always a learning um, process for me. So I appreciate, like I said, this board development. It you know, I'm more comfortable looking at spreadsheets and surveys and things like that than trying to figure out what's going on with an 8-year-old. So I appreciate that.
Just as a reflection on the meeting, speaking of spreadsheets and things like that, I appreciate a couple things. Number one, the work that Paul did for our community. He's steered us well for a long time now. I appreciate his work in getting us ready for the potential for an override in the fall. Very grateful to him and to his company for being by Osborn's side throughout this, as they've been before, and also appreciative of all the work that has gone into preparing our budget, both from the work with the budget committee and then Colleen's work and just being thoughtful to, well, her job being made a little bit harder by the legislature not having given us a budget yet to work with. So making sure that in preparing for tonight, that she's preparing you for all potentialities and for the best possible ones for this district. I guess that takes us on to future agenda items.
I do want to put a future agenda item. I just need to get my notes in order still. I wouldn't mind giving a quick forward report on the ASBA leadership, or something like that. So that was really informative, really awesome. So.
I'm interested in reviewing the district's safety plans and protocols. Suspect that might be in an executive session, but to get a better understanding of what plans exist, how are we set up, how do we deal with emergencies, or serious law enforcement issues. Also interested in I'm drawn. Sorry, it was. I will email you, but
Right.
it had to do with. Thoughts on, or any updates on the marketing, technology, social media campaigns, or anything like that. Just be interested in seeing kind of like what work is going to be what work might be happening over the summer, to prepare for the fall, etc. So, but just overall, how are we doing with our our uh, awareness campaigns, and something that Ed touched on as a result of the survey was, just I'd like to hear. It could be through an email or a different or just a one-on-one conversation. Kind of your thoughts on, people are unaware of what's happening in the district, and I think that's a separate issue from enrollment and whatnot. But like, is there? How do we get people without kids to be better engaged, or is that even something that we need to work on? Should we work on it? Like, just your thoughts on that.
I think he also was talking about parents with kids because he has a lot of friends who have kids who don't send their kids to this district does.
Yeah.
And it does have to do with enrollment. How do we engage the successes of the district through our communications for parents? Because like there is this perception and we all have different circles and live in different communities. This district has changed drastically since I moved here. Like there in every corner there are new apartment complexes. So, and a lot of our families have been pushed out because of gentrification, the prices going up. But the reality is that even those, new families like his age that have that age children, like they don't send their kids here. So, and he struggles with that because he has a lot of friends who live in this area that don't send their kids. I think I was able to move past it a long time ago, but yeah, it was the same problem that I had that I would always bring up. And what can we do to bring those children into our foster most of those families are the not in my backyard type of children, they're like progressive, the same things. They don't want their children to go to our schools because our schools have mostly Latino children and they're Italian schools, and that's the reality.
Yep.
Most kids are going to Xavier and Madison, or
No, I definitely agree. I definitely have an interest in, and I agree with what you're saying, but like in enrollment, but separately, not focusing on enrollment necessarily, but like, is there value in somehow engaging those folks that don't have kids? I've met a lot of people who don't have kids, not going to have kids. They're generally supportive of the school district, but they wouldn't know whether the school's headed in the right direction or not. And I feel like we serve them as well. And they're our constituents, they're part of the community. So like, is there something to be done there? That's what be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. It went out
in spring.
in the spring. So yeah, it was nice to get it. I look forward to. But anything else before we adjourn? Thank you as always for a great meeting, and meeting's adjourned. We all need to sign the budget, right?